Hey, this is Mr. Mitchell. We're going to have a video about viruses. Here are some questions about viruses. Go ahead and write those down. And here's a little bit about a virus. And if you notice, we have several different depictions of what a virus looks like. Notice many of them are different, but the only thing that is common is that they have stuff sticking out of them. And I'll explain why they have that in a moment. Let's get to the definition of a virus. A virus is a tiny, non-living particle that invades and then multiplies inside a living cell. Now, these viruses are not cells, they are not organisms, and they can only multiply when inside a cell. But they do a good job of killing cells. Now, noticed earlier that there were lots of different artistic depictions of what a virus looks like. It's kind of hard to put your finger on viruses because all viruses are not the same. Some viruses are very harmless, some viruses are deadly, and how they're even spread is completely different. But we do not seem to have a cure for viruses. But anyway, let's learn a little bit more about the details of viruses. One definition you'll need to know is the host. The host is the organism that the virus multiplies inside. Whenever we have a virus, like a head cold is produced by a virus, or whenever we have a cold sore, then we, of course, are the host. And it's not limited to people, of course. They're all living things that could be the host of a virus. Viruses live inside hosts, and yes, they cause them harm. They're kind of like a parasite, you might say. Now, viruses are smaller than cells. You can see this virus is smaller than this cell, and you can see these viruses are much smaller than the cell they're attacking. They're smaller than a cell, and they vary in shape and size. Now, some of them can even look like bullets. Some of them can look like rods, some of them can look like bricks, but all of them have two basic parts to them. You can see those two basic parts right here. They all have a protective coating, and this protective coating is made of protein. And they all have an inside or an inner core that's made of genetic material. So inside all these viruses are genetic material, and the outside is made of protein. Inside this genetic material is instructions for making new viruses. And as you can see down here, that's something they do well inside the shell. Now, they do have on these depictions these long rod-like things. And the reason they have that is because it seems like these viruses can only attach to a few types of cells. And whenever they do attach, it's kind of like a key, like this virus was meant to be able to get inside the cell. This is not osmosis where it just vanishes inside it. It seems like it is, the genetic makeup of it is like it is a key unlocking the door to let it inside. It's kind of a strange thing, these viruses. But a certain virus can only attach to one or a few type of cells. For example, if you have a cold, if you have a head cold, you only are going to have a head cold because of the viruses attacking inside the nose or the throat. Sure, that virus could be in, say, cells near your big toe, but it's not going to be able to attack those. It, for some reason, is only able to attack those inside the nose or throat. It's like it was just meant for only certain kinds of cells. Now, there are things called active viruses and hidden viruses. Once you get inside a cell, a virus's genetic material takes over many of the cell's functions. Now, this is going to happen in both of these, but in the active virus, it happens then. If you have the head cold here, it's happening then. If you have AIDS, for example, it's happening then. It's not going to lay around inside you. It's going to go ahead and attack you. Or if you're an apple tree or an apple orchard, this apple mosaic virus will happen then. However, something like a cold sore here, it's actually something that stays in your body for a long period of time. It's kind of hidden, and when certain conditions happen, then that's when that virus kind of starts to attack. Now let me go back to this page before on how a virus kills a cell. So, once inside the cell, the virus genetic material takes over many of the cell's function. It quickly begins to produce the virus's proteins and genetic material and makes new viruses. The invaded cell makes copy after copy of these new viruses. And when it is full, like here, it bursts open, releasing hundreds of new viruses as the cell dies. Now keep in mind, it cannot replicate itself outside the cell, but can only replicate itself inside the cell. So it has to have this cell here to even reproduce. So when we're talking about, like, we'll go back to this next one, a hidden virus, like the one in the cold sore here, this virus also inserts itself into the genetic material inside the cell. So this virus is going to be here inside these cells even when it doesn't show up. In fact, chances are you have this cold sore virus inside you now, whether it is showing up or not. So, but it just doesn't take over. When the cell divides, like it normally would do, the virus's genetic material divides with it. And under certain conditions, the virus's genetic material would suddenly become active and take over the cell's functions, kind of like an active virus would down here, except it just kind of stays there, latent, you might say. So cold sores are an example of a hidden virus. And what prompts them, scientists think, are maybe excessive sunlight or stress. But it kind of leads you to believe, well, what prompts some of these other things? Now, viruses can be spread in various different ways. If you have a head cold here, this lady sneezing, for example, the virus in the saliva could be passed on to someone else. But that's not the case in other things, like AIDS here. AIDS is only passed on through sexual contact, and I believe there is also some danger with blood transfusions, for example, with AIDS. So completely passed on in two different ways, and that's how viruses are. There's not one set way in which viruses are passed. It just depends on the virus, depends on what the effects are, depends on the conditions. There is no cure for viral diseases. There is no cure for like head colds. There's no cure for like apple mosaic virus or cold sores. However, there are some medicines that can relieve symptoms. If you go to the doctor with a head cold, he or she could probably give you something to help with the symptoms. This person's probably having soup here to help with the symptoms. If you have AIDS, the doctors can give you something to help with the symptoms, but still, on these instances, they're not going to be able to give you anything to cure it. Best thing, of course, to do is have preventative medicines. Vaccines. There are vaccines. A lot of the vaccines you get whenever you enter school at age 5 or whatever it was were to prevent some viruses from coming in. And you probably know about vaccines. They introduce a small, weakened, or altered virus to stimulate the body's defenses. So a vaccine actually gives you some of the virus, but just small enough to where it stimulates the body's defenses against it. They attack the virus before it can get to the cells when the virus actually comes in. Hey, don't forget to do the questions. Hope you learned a little bit about viruses.